Does a person need to eat Seuda Shelishit, or Shalosh Seudot, as some call it, or is it just optional? So let's begin with the Gemara. The Gemara talks about it in Masechet Shabbat, Kuf Yud Chet Amud Aleph. It's Kol HaMekayim Shalosh Seudot b'Shabbat. Whoever does 3 Seudot on Shabbat, Nitzol Mishalosh Pur Anuyot, they survive from 3 different catastrophes, Mechevlo Shel Mashiach, from the birth pains of Mashiach, Medina Shel Gehinam, U'Memlechem Gog u'Magog. So they get saved from Gehinam, from the problems at the time of Mashiach, and also from the war of Gog u'Magog. V'amar Rabbi Yosef, Yehei Chalki ba'alam haba me'ochle shalosh seudot b'Shabbat. Rabbi Yosef says, I hope that my portion in Olam Haba is from those who eat the 3 meals on Shabbat. V'amar Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Kol mi shemashlim shalosh seudot b'Shabbat, yotzei kol mishamayim machliz alav, az tid'anag al Hashem. Rabbi Shimon says, whoever finishes the 3 meals on Shabbat, a voice comes out from heaven and says, Az titanai gal Hashem. Keneged Seuda Rishona v'hitkarticha al bamot ha'aretz, keneged Seuda shneya. And the pasuk continues for the second meal, v'hachaticha nachalat Yaakov avicha keneged Seuda Shelishit. And it finishes the pasuk with the 3rd meal. Umeidach hamachsi Seuda achat Sheloshet haseudot onsho rab has v'shalom. And a person who misses one of these 3 meals, his punishment is a great one. Has v'shalom. Kaf ha'ayim siman resh sadi aleph seif katan aleph. Okay, now let's take a look at Chova Gemura. Do you have to eat bread? Chova lechol pat beseuda sheshit lanashim benashim. Men and women need to eat bread. But lo yithamek adam betirutzim shonim. Don't come up with different excuses. Al ken yasim lev lechol seudat haboker miyad bevoo bebet haKnesset. Right away when you come home in the morning from praying Shacharit and Musaf, have your first meal. Therefore you'll be able to have bread and Seuda Shelishit early. But if you have your first meal very late, then you're going to be very, very filled. That's the Protan Siman Resh Sadi Aleph Seif Aleph. And okay, shebeshum ofen lo yachol le'echol lechem. Someone who completely cannot eat bread. Yochal kazait uga. You can eat a piece of like let's say a cake or tafshil mimene dagan, something that was made out of grains. If that, even that you can do. Yochal tafshil acher kebasar o dag, eat some meat or fish. Yochal perot. And if you can't do that, then have fruits. If you can also eat fruits, the minimum you should have is a revi'it of yain, 3 ounces, and that's protein in Shabbat, bet, shin, mem, bet. And now let's take a look. Now the discussion is on dagim, betza, and yain, fish, eggs, and wine and Seuda Shelishit. Yesh inyan chashub lechol dagim beseuda Shelishit, and that's brought down the pri etz hayim that you should have fish, or like they do a lot, tuna fish. Betov lechol betza, you should also have an egg. Why an egg? Mishum evlam shel Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, also Yosef HaSadik and David HaMelech, shenifteru b'shat mincha shel Shabbat. So who are the 3 that passed away on Shabbat by mincha time? Moshe, Yosef, and David HaMelech. V'chein tov lishtot me'at yain b'seuda. Also have some wine. V'yivarech alav bor pri hagefen. Okay. Let's continue. The Zman of the Seuda. When should you have the Seuda Shelishit? Zman Seuda Shelishit matchil mizman mincha gedula. From the time of mincha gedula. Dahaino, hatzi sha'a achar chatzot hayam. 30 minutes after the chatzot of the day. That's when mincha gedula, and that's when the time of Seuda Shelishit starts. V'tov litpedel kodem mincha v'achakach le'echol. First you should pray mincha and then eat. Ach im mechamat ken yafsid shi'ur Torah. But if doing that, praying and then eating, will cause you to miss a shi'ur of learning, you should eat and then pray mincha. Brought down in Siman Resh Sadi Aleph Seif Bet. Yesh latchil et Seuda kodem hashekiah. You should start the meal before sunset. Ve'im lo hispik, if you don't have time, yitchil miyad bizman ben hashemashot kol shelo hagia adayin set hakochavim. You could start even ben hashemashot, which is after the shkiah, as long as it's not set yet. And it's okay and it's permitted to even eat after the tzeit if you started before, even if you started ben Hashem Ashot. Kotev Maran Arishon L'Tzion Rabbeinu Avadia Yosef. Cham Avadia writes in Shabbat Bet Shin Sadi Dalet Umaasim Bechol Yom She'anu Matchilim Bechol Shabbat Lis'ol Seuda Shit Kama Dakot Kodem HaShigiah. we start the meal a few minutes right before the Shkia. Mitzvat harbatzat haTorah barabim b'Shabbat, because he was going around giving classes on Shabbat. Ad samuch l'Shkiat hachama, until the sunset. Ki zechot harabim davar gadol hu k'mub'ar b'Shulchan Aruch in Siman Pei Tet Seif Vav. ואכן, כך היה מנהגו של מרן שליטה, חכם עובדיה, לפני כ-50 שנה, שהיה מוסר שיעור בצהרי השבת בבית הכנסת אוהל רחל. He would give classes in the shul אוהל רחל לעדת הפרסים בשכונת שמואל הנביא בירושלים עיר הקודש. He would give a class there בגבוהותו של חכם אליהו אבא שאול, along with when חכם אליהו אבא שאול עליו השלום was the גבאי there, אביו של מורנו ורבנו הגאון רבי בן ציון אבא שאול. That's that was the father of Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul. וכן עד לפני כ-20 שנה, before 20 years, שהיה מוסד דרשת שבת הגדול ודרשת שבת שובה בישיבת אור החיים בשכונת הבוכרי בירושלים. היו באים כ-2,000 איש, כולם היו צריכים לשמוע את מוצא פיו של מרן, וגדול היה המחזה ומרגש מאוד. היה גומר דרשתו דקות ספורות לפני השקיעה, just a few minutes before the שקיעה, והולך הליכה מהרה לביתו של ראש הישיבה הגאון רבי ראובן אלבז שליטה. So at the time was Rabbi Raven Shlita, that he would go run to his house in order to eat the meal there. כדי להספיק להתחיל סעודה שלישית קודם השקיעה. אשר עין ראתה כל אלה. גם אם אינו יכול לאכול פת, even if he can't eat bread, ואוכל מזונות וכזה, או שותה רביעית יין, if he eats מזונות or wine, והגיע השקיעה, and it came sunset, יאכל וישתה מיד ויסיים עד צאת הכוכבים. You should eat and drink quickly and finish by צאת הכוכבים. אכל עוגה או שתה יין שלו בסעודה קודם השקיעה, if he had cake or wine not in the meal before שקיעה, והגיע השקיעה יפסיק לשתות, he should stop before the שקיעה, אבל רשאי להמשיך לאכול עד צאת הכוכבים ולא יותר, כיוון שיש קיבוט לאכילה. שעד שיגמור הכל אכילה אחתי, אבל שתייה כל כוס וכוס בפני עצמה היא. So he's saying here, if a person was eating or drinking not in the meal before the shki'ah, then he can continue the meal and not the drinking. But if he was drinking and eating in the meal, it would be okay. Seuda Shelishit bevet HaKnesset. Should you eat Seuda Shelishit in shul? Min hadin mutal la'aroch Seuda Shelishit bevet HaKnesset. You could serve it in shul im shirei HaKodesh b'divrei Torah, im shirei Kodesh b'divrei Torah, while singing songs of pizmonim and learning Torah. Bilvad she'akbidu shelo ledaber sham devarim b'telim. As long as you're not talking devarim b'telim in wasteful words. כפי שיש להיזהר תמיד מחובת השמירה על קדושת בית הכנסת, in order to protect the sanctity of the shul. וכתב מרן הראשון לציון רבנו עובדיה יוסף, יחווה דעת, חלק ג' סימן י', ומה גם שדורשים שם בהלכה ובאגדה, ואין לך דבר גדול יותר מזיכוי רבים. There's nothing bigger than זיכוי רבים, especially teaching תורה בהלכה נגדה. וגם סעודה זו נעשית בקהל רב ונחשבת כצורכי רבים. And it's done in a big way, and it's part of the tzorchei rabim, כדי שיוכלו להמשיך את השיעור בתפילת המנחה שאחריו עד סמוך לשקיעת החמה. מתחילו הסעודה לפני השקיעה, they should start the meal before sunset, ממשיכים אחר כך סעודם עם דברי תורה, וידועים דברי הירושלמי שלא ניתנו בשבתות וימים טובים לישראל, אלא לעסוק בהם תורה. And like it says in the Yerushalmi, that those days were given in order for them to learn Torah. ואולם, Sibur hamedavarim devarim betlim besudah shishit. If there's a congregation that they just talk stupidity and nonsense during sudah shishit, hanerechet bebet HaKnesset, and you're eating it in the shul, and hamshum hetel laharochet sudah bebet HaKnesset, they have no permission to do that in the shul. Bechovah legabayim, it's the gabay's responsibility laharochet sudah becheder sedadi. Take it out of the shul. Don't leave it there. The bali kashu asibur beisur hamur zeh. It's a big isur hamur to sit and start talking stupidity in the shul. If you know that that's what's going to be, which happens more so than not, then probably don't have the meal in the shul itself. Let's say you forgot to say Let's say after he ate bread. It's the same like the first two Seudot. If you already started that fourth beracha, you don't go back. But in the first two meals, if that happens, then he actually does go back. And that's brought in Shabbat, Chelik Bet, Shim Mem Gimel, and Shin Dal and Mem. Ha'ochel Seuda nosefet, if he eats another meal, a fourth meal, v'shachach lomar letzeh v'chalitzenu, dino ki Seuda Shelishit. So let's say a person on Shabbat, he was able to fit a fourth meal, and he forgot to say letzeh v'chalitzenu, he does not go back and say it. Nashim. Isha sheshachacha lomar letzeh v'chalitzenu b'Seuda Shelishit, if the lady forgot letzeh v'chalitzenu, eno chozeret kelal, she doesn't go back. Eno omeret birkat asher natan, she doesn't even add that extra bracha before the beracha, the fourth beracha of la'ad asher natan menucha l'shabbatot. She doesn't say that. Achar seta kochabim. Hamesagim Seuda Shelishit achar seta kochabim. Someone who finishes meal, the third meal, after the tzit. V'shachach lomar letzeh v'chalitzenu eno chozeret kelal v'af eno omeret birkat asher natan. He doesn't say the tzit or the other beracha asher natan because it's already after tzit. Rosh Chodesh Shechal b'motzei Shabbat. Let's say Rosh Chodesh, like it is actually right now. Rosh Chodesh fell out on Motzei Shabbat. Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan and 5784. Afim himshich b'Seuda shit ve'achal kazait pat le'achar seta kochabim. He started before Shkia and he continued until after the Shkia. Eno omer ya'aleh v'yavo. He does not say ya'aleh v'yavo. Umikol makom pashut she'imchal Rosh Chodesh b'Shabbat. If Rosh Chodesh is on Shabbat, when he continued the meal after the Shabbat, so if it's Rosh Chodesh on Saturday night, Sunday, not on Shabbat, and his meal continues into that time zone, he doesn't say Ya'aleh v'yavo. But if it was Rosh Chodesh on Shabbat, not on Saturday night, Sunday, and he continued his meal from Shabbat onwards, he does say it. Kos birkat hamazon, having the cup. Im siyem et Seuda la'achar tzet kochavim. He finishes the meal after tzet. Uberach birkat hamazon al kos yain, and he said birkat hamazon on a cup of wine, or grape juice. Lo yishte et hayain. He should not drink that. Elaim ken hu ragil lezamen al kos, unless he's that person who always makes zimun on a cup. Al ken sibur sheregilim lezamen al yain שבסעודה שלישית בבית הכנסת או בסעודת חתן וכלה שמזמנים תמיד על הכוס רשאי אז מזמן לשתות את הכוס ויטעמו גם החתן וכלה. Because so in a case where they are doing that often, then he should drink, and if they're doing it for חתן and כלה שבברכות, they should also. והשותה רביעית לא יזכיר ורצה בהחלטין בברכה האחרונה על היין. When he says the ברכה האחרונה after the drinking of the wine or grape juice, he does not mention Urseva Chalitzin because it's already Saturday night and it's after the tzit. Asiyat Melacha, Hamarich Beseuda Shelishit Lachar Tzet HaShabbat, a person who continues his meal after Shabbat, Mutalo Lomar Lechavro Sheotzi Et HaShabbat She'atzei Melacho Cha Ba'avuro. He could tell his friend who already Shabbat ended for him to do Melacha. Sharei Etzel Osei Melacha Kvar Yom Chol Gamur, because that other person already to Yom Chol. Vim huskach lasot et melacha ba'asmo davka, if he has to do the atzmo himself, the melacha, and it's already after set. Yomar baruch mabdil ben kodesh lechol v'yaset melacha. He just says that and he can do it. Ach lo yomar lesevach hatzin bekat hamazon, but then you don't say in bekat hamazon lesevach halitzenu, and that's brought down in Shabbat Chalik Bet Shin Ayin Vav and Shin Mem Chet. Let's take a look at some other things I brought down from the Seuda Shelishit. So Seuda Shelishit is also referred to as Ra'ava de Ra'avin. It's one of the highest points on the Shabbat. And we'll mention it again, that why do we even have 3 meals on Shabbat? Because it's brought down in Shemot, Tet Zayin, Pasuk Kaf Hei, Vayom el Moshe, Ichlu Hayom, Ki Shabbat Hayom La Hashem, Hayom Lo Timsa'u Basadeh, Hayom. It's 3 times. So there are 3 meals that we have on the Shabbat. And from Ikar Adin, from the law, a person should wash his hands and should have even lechem mishneh on the meal of Seuda Shelishit. He brings down here, Ulam bitkufat hageonim, during the time of yesh eduyot leminhag de'echol et Seuda Shelishit baboker. They would actually have Seuda Shelishit early in the morning, bitsamud the Seuda Sheniya, right next to the second meal. Halachot katuv nusach ktav yad Milano, and he brings down there that what would they do in the morning? They would go to shul, come back, have an early meal before Chatzot, and then a light meal. Then they would wash up and have a second meal right after Chatzot, and that would be Seuda Shelishit. And then they would go and pray Mincha. And He says here, Yehuda ben Barzilai ha-Barceloni, מציין את קיום המנהג לאכול את הסעודה השלישית יחד עם סעודת הבוקר. So he brings it down, וכותב שאין לנהוג כך, but he says don't do it that way. That's Yehuda ben Barzilai ha-Barceloni. He says even though there was customs that way, don't do it. בספר אור זרוע מובאת תשובה של שלמה בן יצחק, התומכת במנהג לאכול סעודה שלישית בסמוד לסעודה שנייה. He brings down that from the אור זרוע, from a teshuvah of Shlomo ben Yitzchak, that you should do it. ומציין שכך גם כתבו נתן מרומי. Rabbi Natan Meromi also brought it down. ואחיו אברהם ודניאל, שחיו באיטליה, so the Italian communities did it. מנהג זה מוזכר גם בשיפולי הלקט. So you have a few opinions that say that the Baal Halachot Gedolot, you have the Or Zarua, you have Rabbi Natan Meromi, and the Shibudei HaLeket, who actually that's what they did. They would have the early meal in the morning, a light meal, and then the Seudah Shelishit right after Chatzot. Al pi hanoheg hayom. Today, what's our custom? Zemana Seudah Shelishit, who's mizaman mincha gedolah. Today we do Seudah Shelishit from mincha gedolah onwards. Kelomar achare shet v'chetzi shaot zmaniot. After 6.5 hours from the day, that's when mincha gedolah is. Berov hakilot mikubal le'echol seudah shlishit acharei tefilat mincha ketana. Most places they eat after tefilat mincha ketana. ובקהילות רבות בעיקר חסידיות מתקיימת סעודה משותפת בבית הכנסת. They have the meal in the shul, the חסידים. מקובל להאריך בסעודה שלישית אל תוך הלילה, and they would extend it until the night. מעבר לצאת השבת. after שבת. ואומנם אפילו שהסעודה נמשכת אל תוך הלילה, מזכירים בברכת המזון את השבת, לצבע חצינו, מכיוון שעדיין לא נאמרה ההבדלה. So you do say לצבע חצינו. I looked up Acham Musafin, and he stated that you should have Seudah Shelishit with your family at home. So seemingly from that, they probably prayed Mincha Gedolah on Shabbat. Then they would go home, where Musafi is saying in Yerushalayim, and have the Seudah at home with their family. His response was, what, you want your wife and kids to eat the third meal by themselves? He said, no. Have your first meal together, the second meal, after you pray Shacharit and Musaf, go pray Mincha Gedolah, and then come back, have the meal with their family, and then go back to shul to pray Arvit, or for Shi'ur Torah. Rava de Ravin. That's the reference to Seudah Shelishit al pi Kabbalah. And he says that here, he keneged ha-bechina ha-kabbalit ha-nikret ze'er anpin. It's talking about the concept of ze'er anpin. Ha-mehove kinu de-sfirat tif'eret. Zemana shel Seudah Shelishit le'et de-medome erev ben ha-shemashot. It should be ben ha-shemashot. Mechuna Rava de Ravin, which means the Retzon or the Retzonot. That's what it means in Aramaic. Shemashma'uto et Ratzon miyochedet sheba yecholot hatfilot litkabel b'Ratzon. That's the time that the prayers go up. Kimuvar bepiyot b'nei hechla. Seudah azon nikret seudato shel Yaakov. It's keneged Yaakov. Ubizchutam nitzolim memenachem et Gog uMagog. And whoever eats this meal, the Seudah Shelishit, you will survive the war of Gog uMagog. It's such an easy thing to do. You eat a couple of pieces of bread, and you survive it, the war. So here are some of the basics of the eating of the meals of Seudah Shelishit. Let's take a look also at the Ora Hayim Resh Sadi Aleph. V'yeh zahir me'od lekayim Seudah Shelishit. Okay. This is actually brought down in the Aruch HaShulchan Ora Hayim Resh Sadi Aleph. A person should be very careful to do Seudah Shelishit. V'amru Chazal. And the rabbi said in Shabbat Kuf Yud Chet, the Kol HaMekayim Seudah Shelishit nitzol meshalosh pur aniyot mechavlo shel Mashiach u'medina shel Geinam u'memechem Gog uMagog. Amar Rabbi Yosef yeh chelki im mekayme gimel Seudot b'Shabbat. Ve'halevush, the Bush katav shehem min Torah, that the 3 meals are from the Torah. K'dichtiv tlata hayom, ayin sham, because it says hayom 3 times in Shemot, like we read earlier. V'im efshar she'enam mamash min Torah, and even if it's not from the Torah, mikom makom vadai mitakanat Moshe Rabbeinu hem, sheken kibel mesinai. That even if it's not in the Torah, he definitely got it from Sinai. V'hem medamzim neged gimel avot. Those 3 meals are connected the avot, and they're also connected Torah, Nevi'im, Uktuvim. The 3 sets of books, the 24 books that we have. When they got the man, nitan lahem al gimel seudot. They got the man on Friday in 3 different meals. והבאנוהו לאל סימן רש עין ד' עין שם ודברים גדולים נוראים תלויים בגימל סעודת אלו. There's a tremendous amount of things in those three meals. ומבוארים בזוהר בכמה מקומות. אז בrought down in the זוהר. ולכן יהא זהיר בזה וכך אמרו חכמים. You have to be very careful. חייב אדם לאכול גימל סעודת בשבת. You are required to have the three meals on Shabbat. ואפילו אם הוא שבע, even if you're filled, דיו שיאכל פת בקבצה ומעט יותר, have a full meal of a קבצה, דקבצה הווה אכילת ארעי, ואף על גב בגמרא קי"ט עמוד ב' משמע דדי בכזית, even though the Gemara says you should have even a כזית, מטעם זה יש חוקים באמת על זה. אמנם כבר כתבנו בסוף סימן רש עין ד' שזהו מצד הדוחק, בוודאי יצא בכזית. אוקיי, כזית you're going to be יוצא, אבל לכתחילה, you're one of those Jews who wants to do it right, צריך יותר מקבצה. You have even a little bit more than קבצה. אין שם, ואם אי אפשר לא כלל לאכול, if you can't eat anything, אינו חייב לצייר את עצמו. You don't have to make yourself suffer. והחכם אינה בראשו ולא ימלא בטנו בסעודת הבוקר. But an intelligent man, he won't fill his belly up during the second meal on the morning of Shabbat. כדי ליתן מקום לסעודה שלישית, because you will have room for סעודה שלישית, וחלילה לבטל המצווה הגדולה הזו. Don't give up this big mitzvah. ומי שלא אכל בליל שבת, someone who didn't eat on Friday night, יאכל הגימל סעודת ביום. Let's say if someone, for whatever reason, he didn't eat Friday night the meal, then on Shabbat day you should have 3 meals. וכן ביום טוב, מי שלא אכל בלילה, whoever didn't eat at night, יאכל שני סעודות ביום. You should have the 2 meals during the day. וגם יאמר הקידוש של הלילה. And you should even say the kiddush of the night during the day if he missed it on the night before. And it's brought down in Magen Abraham, סעיף קטן ב'. זמנה משיגיע זמן המנחה, דהיינו, that's the time of eating סעודה שלישית, דהיינו משש שעות ומחצה ולמעלה, 6.5 hours after the morning. ואם עשה קודם לכן, if you did it earlier, לא קיים מצווה סעודה שלישית. If you did it earlier than that, you did not do the mitzvah of סעודה שלישית, והטעם ביארנו בסימן רש פ"ח, סעיף ב' עין שם, ודע, דמדברי כל רבותינו מבואה סעודה שלישית אינה נוגעת לתפילת מנחה. That according to all of our rabbis, that סעודה שלישית has nothing to do with מנחה. ואפילו קודם שהתפלל מנחה יכול לאכול סעודה שלישית, that even if you want to eat before מנחה, it's definitely okay. ואחד מגדולי רבותינו עושה לאכול אחר מנחה, כמובן בתוספות פסחים, one of the גדולים didn't allow it before מנחה, and it says here בשם רבנו תם, מפני שנמצא במדרש שאסור לשתות מים בין מנחה למעריב בשבת. Because it says you're not supposed to, it says in the midrash not to have mayim between mincha and the ma'ariv of Shabbat. Okay. V'hine l'shitat harif v'harambam, according to Rabbeinu Alfasi and the Rambam Maimoni, v'siman resh lamed bet, afilu suda ketana asur afilu samuch lemincha gdola. That you can't have even a small meal before mincha gdola. Peshita שמוכרח להתפלל מנחה מקודם, that you have to pray earlier. אם לא, כשהתחיל קודם חצות, ונמשך עד אחר חצות כמו שהתבאר. אמנם לשיטת החולקים שם, יכול לאכול מקודם. בחכמי הקבלה כתבו דווקא אחר המנחה. So according to the Kabbalah, you should have it after mincha, not before. שכל סעודה נתקנה אחת תפילה השייך לזו סעודה. So according to the Mekubalim, every single meal was after a prayer. And so you would need to do that. You would have you have the Arvit of Shabbat, so you have the meal of Friday night, you have Shacharit, then the meal of Shabbat day, and then Mincha for Seudah Shlit B'Nimsa. Sheyesh Gimel De'ot Bazeh. Achat Davka Kodem Mincha. One says you have to do it before Mincha. Hashanit De'en Kvidah Ketzono Ken Yaseh. Do it whenever you want, before or after Mincha. And then the Vezeu De'ot Rov Poskim Shelo Dibru Bazeh. Shema Minah De'en Kvidah. That is no problem to eat before or after Mincha. Shelishit, the third one says Davka Achar Mincha, specifically after Mincha. Uminhagenu kedeat Shelishit. And our custom is like after the third, after Mincha. Ach im yesh tam she'en bichoto achar Mincha o shekashe alav achar Mincha. If a person can't do it, he knows himself, he knows his schedule, just for whatever reason, just doesn't work out. So do it before mincha, don't give up the mitzvah. Also, women have to eat Seudah Shlit. That all the laws of Shabbat, women and men are the same. Many women don't know this. לקיים מצוות סעודה שלישית, that they should all do סעודה שלישית. וזה לשון רבנו הרמה. Moshe Isserlish. Yesh omrim da asur lishtot mayim ben mincha lemariv b'Shabbat. Some say you can't drink water between mincha and mariv b'Shabbat. Da az chozrim neshamot legehinam. Why? Because that's the time where all the souls start to go back to Gehinam. Why? Because Gehinam is closed on Shabbat. So with the 25 hours that Shabbat is closed, they're off. They're not going through that cleansing process in Gehinam. So the warning was don't drink water, because if you're going to drink water during that time, that's when the souls that are going back to Gehinam get their extra thirst covered, whatever that means. So he says, don't eat a meal between Seuda between Mincha and Ma'ariv. If you can't drink water, of course you can't have a meal. But rather, you should have it more before Mincha. And some say, no, pray Mincha and then eat. And we follow the second opinion. Okay, it says, but if you are going to do this, don't drink from the rivers. I don't know anyone who would want to drink from a river anyway, but if you want to drink from a river, don't do it. But in your house, you want to drink some water, do it. Other drinks are okay. This is important, because whenever they were talking about water, they were talking about water. They were not talking about things that are not water. Lemonade, tea, coffee, that's not water. That's other drinks. It's important to say that. Some say it's only between the 12 months when a father or mother passed away. And that's only that's between Mincha and Arvit, or after the Kabbalat Shabbat on Friday. עד כאן לשנות, ביוד דבריו, דדיעה ראשונה סוברת לאכלה קודם מנחה מפני איסור שתיית מים, דעל פי הרוב שותים בתוך הסעודה, ודעה אחרונה סוברת יותר טוב אחר מנחה מפני האיסור לאכול קודם מנחה. Okay, so we see from here some of the value of having the meal and having Seuda Shelishit. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen.